welcome, Mr. Stiglitz. You just spoke about Ireland, and Ireland reported this 26% growth rate recently due to tax inversions. The problem is just that no average Irish citizen has seen it trickling down. So could you maybe expand a little bit on what you believe could be the contribution of tax justice to overcoming Europe's economic problems in terms of a lack of investment and austerity? Can it play a positive role for the economic well-being of our citizens? Secondly, we were talking about the blacklist. When we were in Washington with the previous committee, the US Department of Justice told us, well, there's nothing we can do about Delaware or so on because we can only deal here with the tax rate but not with the secrecy laws, the company laws, and so on. Do you think it would help to convince Mr. Trump to do something about it if we put Delaware and so on the tax haven blacklist, and would you recommend to do so? Thank you very much.
Thank you. To answer your second question, yes, I think it would help a great deal if you impose sanctions against Delaware and whatever other states in the United States are non-compliant. If it turns out after your investigation they are non-compliant. So it seems to me that you could say, you know, we are only willing to deal with jurisdictions that obey certain standards, and these jurisdictions don't obey those standards, and I'm sorry, European companies cannot deal with banks registered in, say, one of the states in the United States that doesn't meet those standards. I think that would certainly draw attention to the issue and might induce them to change their behavior. I think what you heard from some people in the U.S. Treasury was probably an excuse because they have now acted on some of the issues that they said they couldn't act on before. And so, for instance, and part of this is in response to public outrage in the United States. It was discovered that a very large, very large fractions of purchases of apartments in New York City above $1 million were by LLCs where we didn't know who the owners were. So it was very clear that there was at least the prospect of money laundering going on massively in real estate in the United States, in New York City. And the Department and the U.S. government did respond to that by saying that there has to be a disclosure of beneficial ownership of real estate in first in New York City and Washington, D.C., and I think they are now extending that. So the U.S. government does have a wide set of tools that it could undertake if it wanted to. And so the threat of sanctions might induce it to take stronger actions, and that, as I say, would be very helpful. The broader issue that you raised, first of all, you know, when you say Ireland grew at 26%, I think everybody knows that's not real. Countries don't grow at 26%. And that is only testimony to the phoniness of what was going on. What grew was 26% in the reported income, reported GDP, but it's not as if the citizens in Ireland suddenly got 26% richer. I'm sure if you did a survey of the average person and said, has your income gone up by a quarter over the last year, you will be hard-pressed to find anybody who says their income has gone up by 26% over the past year. And that just shows the extent of this kind of evasion kind of activities that are going on, where what's reported has nothing to do with what actually, the economic activity that actually goes on. But the general point that you raised is that when there is not real tax revenue because of all these monkey business, it imposed an enormous cost because you can't do the investments in infrastructure, education, technology that are necessary for real growth, not for the phony growth that Ireland recorded, but for the real growth that increases the living standards of individuals. And so if you don't have the tax revenues, you can't make those investments in the future. And so that's why what's at issue here, in part, is really the future prospects of Europe as a whole and the world as a whole.
Thank you very much, Professor Stiglitz. The next speaker on my list is for the Greens, Pascal Durand.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Professor Stiglitz. You are a renowned economist and a very well-known consultant, but you were also an eminent member of the Clinton administration. And, well, I would have been wonderful if that had continued for another 4 years, but that voters decided differently. But that means that what you tell us is all the more valuable because you've been on the decision-making side. I'd like to ask you a question more related to this personal side. First of all, you said quite clearly that sanctions are needed, and those who do not respect the rules need to have sanctions imposed on them. And I'd like to have your opinion, and I speak as a lawyer, on the question of soft law and self-regulation, because the law firms and auditors already have rules. So what kind of force of rules would you like to implement? What type of rule would you like to impose? Because we do have these standards